Okay. All right, so this is the third tape of the evening with Richard Snider and Steve Cook. And so let's see where we want to start now. We want to talk about your life.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
Yeah. Are we running? Are we running
Yeah,
here? Yes, we are.
I think we're running.
Okay, so again, my first recollection of life was being with my little brother and my mom and dad at the Air Street house. We've kind of talked about that, and Connie
Yeah.
and Sherry there. Uh, I don't recall anything much about, my mom telling me that I grew up crawling around on the auto parts store floor and playing with nuts and bolts and playing with all the parts and how she would clean everything so precisely.
Are there any early childhood memories of, you doing something really traumatic or something that, you remember a story or two as an early,
Well, again, I don't recall anything about the window of being at that store. I do recall the Air Street. I recall the thing that we had talked about one time where um, it was before I even had any inclination of doing magic that somebody thought it'd be a great idea to do this magic trick for grandma, for Nanny. And that's where I found this big, probably a teapot that had a spout and it looked kind of like a magic teapot, magic lantern. And I convinced Connie that we would both put on towels for some reason and for like capes, and we would load flour into this teapot and we would tell Nanny to watch us and we would I would go blow into this teapot and make the flour come up in a big puff of smoke that would hide everything, and then you would jump out and magically appear. This is Connie would jump out and magically appear. And I blew this thing, it got all over all of us. It didn't make a very dynamic cloud, it just blew flour everywhere.
flour all over.
And of course, Nanny, being from Depression days, didn't like wasting stuff, so blowing her flour all over the house was
very
she
wasteful.
probably swept a lot of it up and sifted
Put it back in.
put it back in there. But that's about all I remember there.
How old do you think you and Connie were? Like 5 or 6 or something?
Yeah, I don't remember dates. We would have been 5 or 6. We had been enough to move around a little bit, and that our siblings would have been still in diapers, just barely moving around. When we talked to Sherry, she remembered very clearly her and Jim doing stuff, and diapers and poop, and being babies, and all the goings on with them. But I don't remember much. I remember nap time. I remember that's where we first helped Connie, particularly Connie and I, putting the butter and putting the cinnamon and sugar on cinnamon rolls. It's where we first learned the whole process.
Now, you learned that when Nanny was at Air Street or Kirkwood?
At Air Street. We did it at Kirkwood or whatever also. And I remember doing that as a more grown-up person. But I remember we were still big enough to kind of help do some of that stuff. Not the little ones, not Jim and Sherry, but Connie and I could do that.
Do you remember anything about Nanny hosting college kids in her home or high school?
I don't.
Young men.
I kind of heard
Johnny remembers some stuff about that.
I heard a little bit of that. I'm sure she was a good-hearted person, but I don't remember any other people being over there. I know later my mother, Cynthia, would again wouldn't host, but she was on some board of like wayward women or something that like would help teenage girls that either had gotten pregnant or were on the run from a bad family, and had something like that. But I don't remember Nanny doing anything. I remember that one incident with the flour. I remember cinnamon rolls. I remember lots of nap time. I remember getting to go on the cart back to watch the movie. I remember somehow a big fuzzy time, and then we were on Baker Drive. We were in a regular house of our own on Baker Drive, and I remember playing in the neighborhood and riding bikes. I remember riding a bike past some places. A dog came out and nipped at me, and may or may not have bitten me. And it turns out the dog belonged to a wealthy doctor that lived in one of the nice houses in the neighborhood. And I remember my mom calling the doctor and saying, your dog bit my son. You need to fix his dog bite. Fix it. I remember that. I remember having a little golden collie, not a golden retriever, but a little collie dog that was Roxy, my little dog Roxy. And I remember the trauma that, but I don't remember the circumstance. I remember the trauma of like my mom and dad telling me that Roxy got run over, but I don't remember much more than that. I remember that my mom would tell me that that the dog would she would let me as a probably 5 or 6 or 7-year-old play in the yard, and that the dog would watch us, watch me, and was this sweet little collie dog.
Do you ever remember riding a bicycle all the way to Nanny's house from your house? Would that be too far?
Not to Ayers, riding to Ayers.
To Kirkwood.
And riding to Kirkwood from Baker would be a bad thing. We could probably ride from the Palmetto house, which would have been more my...
The reason I asked that is I remember riding from Casa de Oro, where we lived near Casa Linda Elementary School. We were pretty close to that school. I remember riding, I think, toward the school and then through some little crummy little area and ending up, I think, on Kirkwood.
I think that is kind of doable. Like Baker to Kirkwood is like crazy. It's like way across town.
Oh, way far, yeah.
And but Palmetto, more my high school days, is a little past both of those areas.
Yeah.
So like as you go from, the original to me, the original Corpus Christi, you get all the bayfront stuff like that, but when you're in the town, there's an area that I remember. The Baker Drive is the more rundown area where we lived at first, and then as we moved out to the Casa Linda, Kirkwood, it's a little higher end. Then as you continue moving, whatever direction that was, you get a little fancier house. You get the gated neighborhood, the Ocean Drive gated neighborhoods, and fancy stuff.
All right. Well, I didn't know if you'd ridden your bike all over there.
So we were. So what were we talking? We were talking about me. So this was. This is you. Real deep into early me.
Yeah.
I remember,
move on to the college years, maybe, or
I remember
something.
High school, being a cool kid that played basketball and.
Were you on a basketball team?
Had a car, had a car and could drive, and don't remember really having much in the way of dating. I think I know somewhere in that window of high school, for my senior prom, I took my cousin Marva Moran to my senior prom, and wherever it was, I ended up parking probably my parents' car, which I was driving, somewhere that got towed, and so we came out of the senior prom, no car. Had to call a cab and go somewhere, and again, I'm not sure if we had my parents involved, but somehow I had to go to a sleazy wrecking yard at 2 in the morning
get your car.
To get my car bailed out. I remember, it's kind of all I remember about high school, and then college was Delmar Junior College, 2 years, and that was like, it's cheap enough to do that you can have a car and will actually let you study, quote unquote, in the apartment up above your dad's auto parts store, where you open the windows at night and you have the Macombo nightclub honky tonk going on. And so I had access to a 2-bedroom apartment with 1 bath and a kitchen, overlooking the Macombo nightclub, and went to Del Mar for 2 years. And somewhere in the middle of that first year, some of the other engineering students and we were all math and engineering and science, decided, hey, there's no social thing here at Del Mar. Let's start a fraternity. Let's start an engineering fraternity. So I think it was the Gamma Tau Zeta. We found some fraternity somewhere that would let us be a chapter, and we signed some bullshit stuff, and we somehow became a chapter of the Gamma Tau Zeta engineering fraternity. And the 8 or 9 of us that were engineers at Del Mar that year were like we were all presidents and vice presidents, so we looked good on our resume. And the only thing that we would have is we would have parties in my study apartment overlooking the Macombo nightclub at, over my dad's store. And I remember
Now, didn't your parents live above the store, or was that
no,
later?
They were actually living in Palmetto.
In a house, and you accommodated where they used to live up above.
Yeah, because Del Mar was kind of that direction.
Okay.
It was like after class at Del Mar, I could kind of go home and study, or I could kind of go up here and study. And for times when I would have 2 classes during a weird period of the day, and an 8 o'clock class and a 4 o'clock class, I would run up there and actually study. But the main thing of our engineering fraternity is we had a party up there, and what I recall is late night finding that somebody's date was passed out from drinking too much. And I remember several of us walking this young lady into the bathroom shower and trying to shower her to be awake.
Oh, wow.
And then I remember her date story of driving her home and taking her to her front porch and laying her on the front porch and ringing the bell and leaving.
And driving off. Oh my gosh! Oh no!
I think that guy is dead now.
Oh.
but he was that was the highlight of that whole college career. I don't remember anything about the classes I took.
Yeah.
Or anything significant. There was no sporting stuff that I did.
Did you go immediately to UT after that?
Yeah, so that burned through 2 years and of college, and wasn't real efficient, which means ultimately I had 3 years at UT after 2 years at Del Mar. Mm-hmm. And went to UT. I was already enough of an upperclassman, that I didn't have to do any of the freshman things, so I didn't have to stay in the dorm. And so I went up, and some of the other Del Mar guys that were in the engineering and science, we all we rented a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment right off the campus, actually all over near the law school side of the campus, and had a car. Again, I had my little Chevrolet hardtop car there, and we had a math major and a chemistry major and a physics major and a double E. The 4 of us were there. That first semester, we all made on the dean's list of those engineering studies, because we all really worked at studying. One of our guys left to get married, and a guy came in who was a journalism major, meaning a party party boy.
Yeah, that's serious.
We had a weird name. It was what was it? I'll think of it. Anyway, so he knew everybody that knew how to have fun.
Yeah.
And I think his name was Sammy, or something like that. So anyway, one of our roommates was Sammy, and we had just an endless stream of crazy people that were his friends coming over and enjoying party, and
Which meant they were normal.
which said normal, yeah, yeah. We there was his girlfriend. He and his girlfriend were both strong Catholics, and she was staying in a Catholic dorm on campus. And so at some point our social world was whoever wanted to go with Sammy would end up at the Catholic girls' dorm and meet all these cute Catholic girls. And so there was a window that his girlfriend was someone that was really nice and really smart, and I sort of dated one of her friends, and we kind of hung out together a while, and at some point I started kind of dating his girlfriend because she had sort of broken up anyway. So there was this weird deal with the Catholic girls in the dorm that was part of that whole thing. In between semesters, I worked at, actually, let me think about this. One of those semesters, I worked at the Defense Research Lab, which is when I came home and saw the Whitman shooting from the tower. And we experienced that. During the other summers, actually 2 summers, I worked on, for Atlantic Richfield, on their exploration crew down in South Texas, down near Hebronville, which is down near Kingsville and Brownsville. And I remember, again, my mother told me, when you get out in the sun, wear a long sleeve shirt and wear, that was before we knew about sunscreen, like wear a long sleeve shirt. So I took all my white dress shirts with me when I would go work, and we would work like all week and then get off on the weekend.
What was your job?
My job was multiple. My job was really to be a college student, get to experience all this. So I did the multiple jobs. So 1 or 2 weeks, I would be what they call a jug hustler, and they have these little seismic microphones basically with clip leads that they would lay out a cable that had little runners going out to the side, 100-foot runners going out, and places on those 100-foot runner cables that you could clip 2 clips to this little thing that was basically a magnet with a coil and encapsulated that would vibrate and pick up when you blew up something under the ground, when you set off an explosion. So you would, so the whole scheme of things would be that a truck would pull up, all these wires would be run out.
Were they accelerometers?
You would click these little, basically they acted like microphones basically, but kind of an accelerometer concept with a magnet and a moving coil. So for one little window of time, I would clip these things on and clip these on, and then they would move the truck, and then I would unclip them all in a bag, and I'd go clip them all.
They'd be doing explosions underground?
Yeah, what would happen, the truck would be moving with some recording equipment and lay out all these wires, and one set of jobs was to clip all these little microphones and then move them to the next place. And so for a while I did that. Another job that you would do that I did for a while was back with the dynamite guys. And so the first thing that would happen when we sort of set a path is there was another truck that had a drill that would go ahead and drill holes, and then it would move on, and then another truck that had a bunch of sticks of dynamite would come up and stick a blasting cap in the dynamite and throw it down a hole, and then
That's my phone.
and then set up something so that they could set that off at a predetermined time.
Yeah.
Do we want to pause?
No. Keep going. I'm
Yeah.
just going to bring my phone.
So at one point I was assigned to work on the dynamite crew, And the field boss said, "Now, Richard, don't go anywhere near the dynamite because the
Yeah.
Atlantic Richfield would be real mad if we blew up a student out here."
Yeah.
And so I would stand back, and then the dynamite guys would look at me and say, "Just get the hell over here. If these things go off, and you're in the same county,
Yeah.
you're going to be out of luck." And so I did the dynamite crew for a while and learned how to stick little blasting caps in these big, big, long tubes of some kind of dynamite material.
Oh,
And then at some point during one of those, actually this was the one summer that I worked the whole summer. They said, "Okay, we have another truck that we're going to stick between the hole drilling guys and the dynamite guys, and it's a well logger. And what the deal is you've got this little winchy thing with a big long, basically Geiger counter that you would drive the truck, and once the hole drilling guy drills a hole and goes on, before the dynamite guys get there, you'd back up to the hole and you would run this machine and lower this Geiger counter down the hole and make a paper tape showing radiation levels as you go." And that was cool. So I got to actually run a specific truck to do that. And then I would get up and go, and then the dynamite guys would come throw dynamite in and they'd do all that stuff. And there was a little window too that I got to like hang out in the truck and kind of watch what they did in the truck. And in the truck they had probably a 12-inch wide, 25 or 30-inch long piece of magnetic tape that they had little magnetic heads that would write a signal on this little magnetic tape that you could record on. It's like a piece of piece of recording tape, and then they would bring this thing in a file back to Dallas, and the guys in Dallas would run this through a machine and go look for squiggles, and they would, out of all that, they would map, what the dynamite told them was reflecting underneath the place they were surveying. So I kind of went through all that and learned all that. We stayed in the most crappy place you could stay was the Hotel Vigo in Hebronville. It was a place that had one bathroom at the end of the hall, no air conditioning, springy beds with metal frames, and you had a wash basin in your room. If you would bring yourself a bucket of water, you could wash up in the room. And so that was kind of the summer. And then near the end of that time, the boss down there said, we've got 2 trucks here.
This was the summer of your sophomore or junior year at UT?
My junior year, I think.
Okay.
So we've got 2 trucks here that are Jeep Power Wagons. They're like a precursor to a Chevy Suburban, but really right out of the military. These big jacked up things with monster wheels and grindy standard transmissions. And I don't know that I had ever driven a standard transmission, but they said we have these 2 trucks that were assigned down on Padre Island to do some kind of exploration. This is what we could drive around Padre Island while we were digging holes and looking for oil and stuff. And they're screwed up, and they've got to be taken to Dallas to the main office up there to be reworked. So they're kind of like, we have these 2 trucks that don't work very well. We want you to drive them to Dallas from South Texas. And they picked another kid that was like me, that was a college student, and gave us keys to these trucks and had us drive from the coast up through all the horrible traffic into Dallas, up to Plano to the lab. And that was kind of near the end of that whole summer. The next summer, I was given a job directly in the lab in Plano. And so I got to go, wear a suit and tie.
What was the name of this lab? Defense something?
Yeah, this was a whole different thing. This was the Atlantic Richfield Oil Company.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, there was the windows earlier there between the time at Del Mar and my first year there that I did Defense Research Lab, and the next couple of summers I did
Atlantic Richfield.
Atlantic Richfield in the field, and then Atlantic Richfield in the lab. And that second year, I was never really told, but I read that Atlantic Richfield in South Texas found the richest uranium field that anybody had ever found. And I know it was that point at which my little paper tape started having a squiggle.
Yeah.
And as I would go to the next
So it was the place you were looking
the
at.
place that I was looking at, and it was my little squiggles that mapped a streak of radioactive stuff.
Radioactive stuff.
So
I was wondering what the Geiger counter was for.
yeah, it was the radiation measurement at different levels, and the little squiggle on the paper would just be boring.
So did they go back into the area you surveyed and just mine the heck out of it?
They went back in, and there's a uranium mining function going on there. It's getting kind of late.
I wonder if that's still active.
I don't know.
Big, huge mine or
You
something.
should really look, because it was all real close to Hebronville, Texas.
Hebronville.
If you research like uranium strike in South Texas, Hebronville. So I have a ton of stuff. I don't know if we want to continue, if it's getting boring or if it's getting...
No, that's fine. You're good.
Because that leads me through college and leads me through my connection to Atlantic Richfield. Went to work for Atlantic Richfield right out of college. Lived in an apartment, had 2 or 3 different situations where I had roommates or not roommates. Lived in a house, lived in an apartment, lived in another apartment. Somewhere in there, my little brother Jim ran away from home and came up and showed up at my door when I was in a little apartment, and we lived together for a while. And then our mother came up and said, "You guys need to invest in a piece of property. So I have made a down payment on a house. You need to go live in that house." And so, okay, I was just moving around. So I went to this house, and we had a little 3-bedroom, bath and a half, pier and beam, cute little house. It had a bomb shelter in the backyard you could walk down into. And
what year was that? Junior year?
Yeah, so this was like, this was like senior year, so this was 69 and
So
70.
you're moving around to all these places and you're still in college.
Well, no, this was like, after all the Atlantic Richfield field work, and then graduating, and then I was assigned to the big lab
full-time job
that I had driven the truck to.
Yeah.
And in 69, 70 out of college, the highlight of my last college year was getting into a band, meeting a couple of derelict people, guitar player and drummer and bass player, and we formed a band, and somebody knew how to get jobs, and we
Well, what did you do? Did you play an instrument?
Yeah, I played kind of rhythm guitar, and we played 2 or 3 gigs. I remember playing one gig at a fraternity house, and everybody was like excited and ran outside. And we stopped playing and went out and looked, and this is in one of the crowded little fraternity row strips right around the campus. And somebody had tried to drive through a crowd of people and had, I don't think it really hurt anybody, but got everybody that was drunk already mad. And so there was a car stopped and people jumping on the car and knocking the windows out.
Oh my God.
And a big chaos, and then the police came and anyway, so that was one highlight of my music career. Another time was we played a free job at one of the band shells that is around the campus. As you drive around the campus and kind of get a little bit away from the campus, there's a couple of parks. They have a nice park and they have a band shell in the park. And so I'm not sure how we decided to take our stuff and set up and play in the band shell, but we kind of threw a free concert in the band shell. And
what was the name of your band? Did you have a name?
Morgan.
That's it? Morgan?
Morgan.
The name of the band was Morgan.
It was Morgan. And because Morgan Avenue, somehow that may have been it.
Interesting.
I thought about Morgan Avenue, but we thought Morgan. one of those kind of hip, cool names.
Yeah.
So it was hanging out with a bunch of people that smoked dope, hanging out with a bunch of hippies, hanging out with a bunch of derelicts. It was my senior year. Again, this was like my third year of UT, my fifth year of college altogether.
Right.
And the most important thing that last semester of that last year was a psychology class. The psychology class, it was mostly freshman kind of a class. There's, basic psychology. Show up for the first day and you're in a lecture room with like 200 kids. And the professor says, I don't personally care if you come to class anymore. You're going to have a quiz and that's it. And so during this window of insanity with bands, I walk across the campus one of the few days that I actually showed up on the campus and saw somebody that I remember from the class, the psychology class, who says, how did you do on the final? And I went,
What final?
When was that final? And he said, well, it was yesterday, but we did like A through N, and so M through Z we're doing tomorrow.
Oh.
So I crammed that night.
Oh.
First time I opened the psychology book.
Oh no.
And took the class and made like a 72 or something. It's like slide through. So that was a highlight of my college stuff. Somehow I passed thermodynamics and advanced calculus and all that stuff. And I just blew the psychology class. So the highlight of getting up to Dallas was work for Atlantic Richfield, real job, got to do some cool stuff. Mom bought a house, pushed Jim and I into the house somewhere there. While I was being an engineer at Atlantic Richfield, my little brother had kind of gone back into junior college. Mom and Dad were here. He had gone into like a junior college somewhere in Dallas, and instead of really studying, had gotten with a band and with a bunch of real live musician kind of guys that were doing Chicago, playing the Chicago music with horns and with,
wow,
complex music compared to three chord rock and roll.
What did Jim do? Guitar?
He played bass guitar, and for a while he played drums, but he basically owned drums and owned the bass guitar. And so it was like most people had pianos and guitars at home. Not everybody had a set of drums.
Yeah.
So he ended up playing bass in that thing. And we would do crazy stuff. I was starting to get interested in building speakers and having, in addition to working at Atlantic Richfield, having a company that would rent sound systems to people. Not sure how I really got motivated at that. So I would come home sometime and Jim would be in our little house with a belt sander, belt sanding the finish off of his bass guitar because he wanted to refinish it and filling the house with dust. And or I would be in there, hammering and sawing and, cutting plywood, building speaker boxes. Somewhere in there, I met Debbie, who was to become my wife, and we lived together. And somewhere in the mix of all that was Atlantic Richfield said, we're going to computerize our exploration. We've ordered and we're going to receive this big IBM mainframe computer, and we need you to go up to New Jersey for like a 2-week class and learn how to operate that computer. And I thought that's going to sound so boring. And the biggest mistake of my life is deciding that was so boring that I wouldn't do it, and I quit. I
quit ARCO.
Quit ARCO with the opportunity to go learn.
Oh my God.
In 1974, probably. To be a computer guy. And kind of migrated through there to a whole bunch of building speakers and
I can't
lighting and
believe that.
sound
You would just quit like
and
that.
all this stuff. I was just said, I'm just not interested in doing this.
Yeah.
And
Very independent thinker.
and what's interesting, like I said, Debbie and I had gotten married, and maybe we hadn't gotten married. Actually, we probably hadn't gotten married by that time. We've been living together for about a year. And
If you had been married, she wouldn't have let you quit
she
Arco.
wouldn't have let me quit. And she's always said, I would have quit my little med tech thing and gone up there with you even for 2 weeks. And I think part of my thinking was I'm dating this girl that just graduated from her med tech class and has a job, and I don't want to leave her, and I would never think of asking her to come up there with me.
Oh, I see.
And that was the big mistake, is she's always said, you could have just asked me, and I would have quit this stupid job and gone up there. We would party in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Jim and Debbie and I lived together for a long time. He ultimately decided to come back to Austin and live at this house and go to UT and get into computers and got a job in the computer.
But didn't he major in government or something, or
history? It was some crazy thing, and I'm not sure how he really got. The
computer thing was just sort of a
he worked
crazy coincidence, right?
It was. He worked in the, and again, I'm not sure how he got that job. He got the job working in the basement with a computer at the mainframe stuff there at UT, with the job of helping people put their paper cards into the computer and get their print out.
Key punch cards.
Key punch stuff. And he brought a remote modem dial-up terminal here. And when I would come down, he would show me how to play Star Trek games with this text-based computer that could put little X's on the screen and move the X's around. No graphics, as you would imagine, but it was cool enough that you could play this weird Starship game on the mainframe, skewing into the mainframe there. At some Christmas, your brother Rick brought his Pong game down here, and we hooked it to a TV, which was over here.
And he built that thing, right?
He built that thing in a little box.
It was fun to play, that little, you move your little paddles and you could put a little spin on it.
Yeah, it was a little box with a nest of wires in it. And
I remember playing that.
And so so then when Jim finished that, he went to work for a place called System 2000 in Austin, which was some kind of a operating system startup, and then quickly after that got into a job with Cray Computers. And was immediately sent to Lawrence Livermore Labs in California. And so somewhere in that little window of time, I'm not sure when he got married, but I'm sure it was somewhere in that window of time between college, because he met Patricia at UT, I think, and they got married and somehow set off that direction. So my life was a lot of in Dallas, living in a little house that we bought. Cynthia actually put the down payment. We had $142 a month payment on a little house that initially was like $13,000. Debbie and I ultimately lived there for years. Enjoyed being, two income, no family, no kids. Most of what I did was independent little crazy jobs, building things and selling them and doing lighting and sound and
so was she like the real breadwinner then with her med tech thing? And you were just sort of over here fumbling around and goofing off and getting a little money?
Yeah, as long as we could get $140 a month. We didn't necessarily live on her. She had her own little account she could buy. We didn't have any car payments. We didn't have, we had this $140 house payment. Probably electric bill was $100 a month or something like that. And so we lived cheap, and I did little crazy stuff. There was some window there that I can remember all the various warehouses I was in, and I had mentioned some crazy project somebody brought to me to bend some pieces of plastic and make some little things and box them and sell them.
When did you, in amongst all this, when did you get your home that you now live in?
Well, after 15 years or so of living in that little house, that $13,000 or $14,000 house, we sold it for $78,000, and we bought the house that we're in now, which was $148,000, which now is, since we've added on to it, we spent a bunch of money remodeling, but we kind of moved from the 13 became 78, 78 went in the bank. We signed up for $145,000 house, and almost immediately after that started trying to get pregnant, started that we wanted to have kids, and went through a bunch of infertility stuff, and eventually ended up with a group of people that we kind of went through a whole adoption process, and kind of have the this interesting philosophy that we've got a group of about 5 or 6 couples that all went through the same agency, that all now have kids that are grown up, and that we all kind of felt like parents to all the kids, and so we've got this little bond of a handful of families and a handful of kids.
So both your kids were adopted?
Both of them were adopted, and both of them were out of this group that we, Debbie real specifically will always say that, that any of these kids could have become any of our kids.
Yeah.
And so we know there's four or 5 other families that have kids that we just have this bond with it.
Right.
That kid, however he or she has turned out, could have been our kid.
Sure.
And it's kind of a fun, interesting thing.
I didn't know that.
So Debbie worked forever and forever, and just never really had to take much money out of her cash flow. She used, when Jim was living with us, she used his little Ford Mustang for a while for her car. She bought a Toyota Celica. I have 1985 Toyota Celica. She bought like a 1968 Toyota Celica or something like and we drove that till it died, and then she later bought her 1979 Volvo, which she drove forever, and then I drove forever, and then I sold to my business partner who still has it running around, 1979 Volvo. So during all this window, I did a million little things in electronics and lighting and sound,
And that was Stillwater Audio?
and that was Stillwater Group Industry. So we kind of left it open so you could be anything. And one of the projects I did was a restaurant in Houston, and the fellow I was working with was a lighting fixture salesman. Basically, he had access to all these exotic lighting fixtures, and that was his job. And we kind of partnered up, and we did some discos together, and I won several lighting design awards. So there was a window that I could have sold myself as a lighting designer and a lighting design consultant.
Nice.
My partner was a super salesman, and I would always just close my eyes and try to not correct him when he would be telling some customer that we had these light fixtures that you could put up, and they would just throw light down the corridor, and they would, he would spin all these stories about these fabulous things that you could do with lighting, and people would just, would buy it. And so anyway, so he was kind of a partner / associate. There was a window that we had a warehouse together, and I remember the cool thing was it had a sauna in it, and if we were really having a bad day, we could just go sit in the sauna. So that didn't last. He was a crazy man. I think he eventually just sort of went crazy and went off to do something. I met 2 or 3 other people through him that became friends, and they helped me get other jobs in designing disco lighting.
So this takes you through what age?
This all takes me through about '89 and 1990 or something, from the '70s, '80s, and '90s, in that little window of rock and roll sound and lighting and disco sound and lighting and a little crazy manufacturing. And at some point, we bought the house, we sold the house, we bought the other house. I decided, okay, I'm going to just get rid of everything. And at the time that I was going to get rid of everything, I had a partnership in a nightclub in Nacogdoches, and I actually learned how to spell Nacogdoches with some people. And I had another partnership in a nightclub in Longview, which was just a big whiskey drinking, beer drinking club. And then I had a partnership in a nightclub in Dallas that was Club Brazil. There was a little Brazilian nightclub. And all three of these nightclubs would make a little bit of money, mainly the Longview nightclub. And every weekend on Friday, I would drive to one of these. I would either stop at the Dallas nightclub, because Debbie and I were living in Dallas, and see if there's any money to be had, and then drive out to Nacogdoches, where we had a house that the partners had bought or had leased, and then I would drive the next day out to Longview and meet with the owners there, which would always have some money. And so I would come back with a handful of money, and did that for about a year and a half until the clubs all fell apart, as clubs always do at about a year. And that was about the window that Debbie said, we need to get serious. Buy this house and let's have kids. And so right about
Quit fooling around.
Right about the time that I had stopped that little circulation of nightclubs, and we had committed to buy this $150,000 house, I looked in the want ads and saw an ad that said, Maverick engineer wanted, interview in Fort Worth. For Maverick engineer. And
That's the type of engineer they wanted, a maverick person.
A maverick engineer.
Yeah.
So I signed up to go have that interview, drove to Fort Worth, thought if I have to do it, I'll work in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And
this is because Debbie wanted you to get serious.
Yeah, get serious. If I have to, I'll work in Fort Worth. Went to Fort Worth, had the interview. The guy said, well, this is, do you know anything about security? And I said, well, okay, I had, one of my many jobs was I took a contract to wire up like 200 apartments with security. There was I knew a guy who got me a job, and the job was you go to these apartments, you put some wiring in for the door and the windows, and then when they put the sheetrock in and paint it, you come back and put the sensors in for the security, and you set up your little security. And actually, when I did that, I had gotten a security contractor license so I could do that legally.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, I've got that. And besides, I have an engineering degree. They said, that's what we need. The deal is that this Maverick engineer job is working at Texas Instruments back in Dallas, about a quarter of a mile from your house where you live.
Oh,
in the main plant, so the main Texas Instruments plant. And the deal is, it's an in-house division whose job it is to deal with security for all the DoD projects inside of TI. And, well, that's cool.
Sure, I can do that.
Jump right in, come back home, I've got a job, and it's like at the main plant up here.
Wow.
I don't have to go to Fort Worth.
Yeah.
So I started that job and jumped in as a little team. Had, I think, 3 guys that were kind of at my position, and we were not really computer, I guess we were like security engineers. And so inside of TI, there's sort of 2 levels of security. One was the basic plant security, and one was the DoD secret. So I had to get actually a secret, not a top secret, but I got a secret level security clearance. So I could mess with the wires that protected the building that had the DOD stuff. And had fun doing that. It was a great job. In the middle of all that, I got back into doing computer things. I was disliked by the accounting people because in our department and in different departments, people found a need for a computer, and I found that I could buy the parts because I had studied this somehow, and bring in a box and a power supply and a motherboard and a chip and another chip, and without spending the capital amount of money to buy a computer for $4,000, I could bring in all the parts and a computer would appear. And so I started doing that within that department. Then it became known in other departments. Hey, there's this guy over in the security department that can build you a computer, and you don't have to go to the capital committee to ask for $4,000 or $5,000.
So they short-circuited the appropriations procedure.
Yeah. So I had the accounting people ultimately mad at me.
Well, how many of those computers did you build?
Dozens and dozens.
Oh,
And including, this was about time.
now why would they complain about that?
Well, just, they like the idea of, spending money, and it's a capital asset, and it does something on the books.
You depreciate it or what? I don't know.
But it, it's not just an operating expense.
Yeah.
It's like we're investing, and so when you spend money and it shows up on your asset list.
Yeah, this is not something we normally expense. This is a capital asset.
It's a capital
so
asset.
how can we call it that if you don't spend our capital budget and you're buying these parts?
Right. And so at the same time here that was going on is I had read about a network operating system. This is pre-Windows networking. I'd read about a networking system that if you had this software, you could stick it on a machine that would have been a Unix, Linux machine, and these machines could talk. And so I constructed in our engineering area a network with some boxes that we had built, cheating capital, running this Nexus software that we could plug cables in and get these things talking to each other. And we started like our own little experiment of like networking. And as soon as Windows came out with the first Windows NT networking software, I plopped that on machines and I started building the first network. Now, TI had a whole IT department that was communicating worldwide, but not with networking. They were still arguing about, is the internet, is the DARPANET, which is the precursor to the internet, is that something we want to look at? Because the TI IT department knew how to move data with phone lines, basically, not networking, not internet, not using the whole IP's networking structure. So they were all doing something. Me and my little team inside the electronic security department were building networks, and were having the fortune to have a little segment of our group that were programmers. We had 4 programmers for some reason that were part of our whole team, and they were writing software, and we basically constructed the Ethernet cabling because we were in the cabling business as security. We somehow owned and managed the radio network system at TI, anything to do with radios, and anything to do with wires within the buildings that was not electrical. Anything under 48 volts was our bailiwick. And so we set aside, and this was our plan that our management approved, that we snuck these boxes in, built these boxes, put them at the entry points, put them in the operations center where the guards sat. They could look at alarms and stuff, basically constructed a Ethernet network system around the main campus that we could monitor alarms, and we could control the doors and check people's badges and all that stuff, and as well as doing all the super secret stuff and all the defense project stuff. So anyway, there was like a whole big deal going on there that at some point, TI in its wisdom made a deal with Raytheon to sell all the defense activities to Raytheon. So all the missile control systems, all the guidance systems, all the military hardware electronics that Texas Instruments was making got sold to Raytheon. My boss at the time, the guy who had hired me, was told he was going to be an employee of Raytheon, and he was going to take a couple of engineers and go to Raytheon. And I was to stay at TI, and my job was to take all these areas within all these buildings that TI was monitoring that happened to be DoD security areas, and my job was to rewire them over to a place that, by the way, I would build, that was another control center that people would sit and monitor alarms in the secret areas. So my job was to build a secret place that they could sit and monitor stuff in a building that was going to get sold to Raytheon, and then work with the remaining people to undo the wires and repatch them to go to that place so that those guys could monitor all the secret places. So I did that for about a year and a half until everybody said, that's great. Now take all these people that are left in your organization and we're going to quit paying them. We don't want them here. So we had...
you were the manager of this whole
I become the manager. I'd become the engineer, and then I'd become the manager. And we had about a $10 million a year budget that most of the people that wanted to stay in this kind of business went to work for Raytheon, and the other people, it was my job to help them find a home. But otherwise they would be given packages and they would go away, and I would leave and go do something. And so the first thing I was asked to do was just go work in a building and get on a project of designing HVAC systems, or chiller systems or something. And I thought, well, that's done. So I looked in the job listing, and I found a job posting to go into one of the buildings and be the webmaster for the building. And this was at a time like kind of before there were very many websites that you could go to. This would have been in the 90s, I guess. Internet was real, but knowing how to build a website wasn't something everybody knew how to do. And so I knew how to do that. And so my job was to work with these IBM mainframe computers that were in one of the wafer fab manufacturing buildings that monitored all the resources in the building and that had data coming out and getting stored that would tell you all the stuff about what was going on in the factory. And so my job was to create a website that would have multiple segments on this website for different people in the building that could ultimately extract data out of this big data system to do their job. And so I had to meet with, the circuit board design people and the sort of manufacturing chemical people about what chemicals they used, and the sales people, the sales and marketing people, and create websites that would be their website that would have links into all the big mainframe computers to get all the data they wanted, and then go write the reports off of that data that would help these people do their job. And that was cool and taxing, and I was a one-man shop to do that. And I joke with Debbie, because Debbie just recently had somebody in her group of girls talk about steampunk And steampunk is kind of an architectural style of like the kind of stuff you would see in an old factory with machinery running. Lots of pipes and
Steampunk?
steampunk, yeah.
Is that music?
No, from architecture. So, like in the era when steam engines were coming into factories, factories would have a lot of piping and plumbing, and
Right.
and there's an architectural style that is really like rough warehousey kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot of piping looking stuff, and so that was my idea for the website. So all the stuff was real steampunk.
Oh, I see.
With the web page would open, it would be kind of dark and have some piping looking stuff, and would have, something here that would have like, chemical operations or something. And I would hand that to a guy. This is your website.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the process of me doing that, somebody up in management said, "This is too dark for Texas Instruments. We want a consultant to come in and like come up with the right colors. It's like black is not the color."
Yeah.
I thought, well, we're a manufacturing facility. We need to look like an industrial thing. No, we need to look like a Land's End catalog.
Yeah.
And so they brought somebody in who literally said, I'm going to pick the 4 colors that are used in the current Land's End catalog. There's a nice blue and a nice orange and a nice green. And so we had, I was kind of given the thing of like, here's 4 colors you need to use.
Yeah.
There's nothing except those 4 colors. So I kind of helped redo this thing and made some real boring block of, pink or whatever. So I handed it off to, the individual people in the individual areas. And then while I was doing this, I was learning how to make web connections into this IBM database and extract anything. I could get, how many wafers were made and how long did it take, and I could put that in a report. Well, there was a group that had been around forever. There was the regular IT department report writers that didn't know how to do that. They knew how to run searches on the IBM mainframe and extract data, but they didn't know how to get that to be on a web page. And I knew how to make a web page pop up that would have a chart that would show, all the stuff you want to have. This team knew how to do this other thing. And so I went to work over there, and they said, okay, you're the low man on the totem pole because you don't know how to do this stuff. I said, yeah, but I know how to do what you want to do. And they said, yeah, we want to do that. We want to put it on web pages. But anyway, so I had a conflict in there that the team I was with were real old line programmers that knew how to extract IBM data and make reports. And I knew how to do the other thing, and they didn't want to do it, but they wanted to do it someday. So we kind of ran around in circles. And so I went to the head of the IT department at TI, and I said, look, I've managed this, $10 million a year budget security thing. I'm a registered engineer by now. I've had an engineering registration. I was the webmaster. I did that, and I know how to do these things. These guys don't want to do it. And I'm good at figuring stuff out. I'm good at looking at the various things that are needed to be done and the various resources to do them and how to put that together. I'm good at taking cloudy, fuzzy needs and figuring out the pieces that come together. So is there something that I can do at a better level than sitting in this report writing group? And they said, yeah, we've got a situation where Texas Instruments has hooked up with, who was it? I'll think of it in a minute.
Motorola or something.
Had hooked up with a sort of an accounting company. There was an accounting company like Accenture or something like that was the accounting company for Enron before the Enron debacle about not doing good accounting.
Yeah.
They had changed their name from whatever it was to something else.
SAP or something.
Yeah, and whatever it was now they had contracted with TI to help automate like all this data coming out of the factory to communicate overseas with the foreign contractors that we had in Taiwan that were subcontracting to us. And this company, Accenture, who used to be like Deloitte and Toys or what, it's one of these big companies that was totally embarrassed about Enron, had a new name, but it was the same company that was working for TI. TI didn't quite trust them because they would bill them, tens of thousands of dollars every day. And they were in charge of automating all of our IBM mainframes to talk to all the computers and all the other subcontractors. And so there was a team put together, and I was on that team. And our job was to oversee this Accenture or whatever the company was that actually had the contract to do that, to kind of oversee them and validate, and ultimately be the one that would plug in to do the testing. So that when they said, okay, we've linked this guy now to some semiconductor subcontractor in Taiwan, we want to check and make sure that we can tell them and it'll work. And so the whole plan was that anybody in the sales department of TI could turn in an order to have some weird little chip for Ford Motor that had to go to 5 different Ford Motor factories to get the radios working or to get the collision control or whatever, and be able to run that into a big computer in the sky that would know which subcontractor was making that chip and could tell them to make it and send it to this Ford place to basically build that whole order fulfillment. And so to do that, this company was contracted to build all the code, and we were like assigned to like oversee it. And so the job function was to make a phone call at Dallas time at about 8 o'clock at night to Taiwan or South Korea or China or someplace, and talk to a bunch of Asians who theoretically had been sent stuff already and knew how to program their computers to talk to our computers. And then we would say, we're going to send you this thing and you're supposed to build, tell us what you're going to build, and verify that you would build the right stuff and that you would ship it to the right people. And so that project was like every night from 8 o'clock to midnight, be on the phone to Asia. And it's where I told my boss, it's silly for me to come in here and fall asleep and then get up at midnight. I mean, stay up all night. So I just, I'll come in once a month and I'll give you a report, but otherwise you won't see me. So I moved down here and started this company. And
started this company.
Yeah, it's
while you were supposed to be doing that.
Right, and so hooked people up to the internet and drove trucks around, and then at 8 o'clock I would sit in here, get on the
and
phone,
do your other job.
Call. Had a guy in Dallas that would bridge in with me, and we would talk to these guys in Singapore or someplace, and did that for a long time until it got so bad that when I was back in Dallas at my office in the IT department, I would be getting calls from people down here. I mean, I would actually be doing business in there on that.
And your boss saw all this.
Boss's phone, and nobody really caught me, but I finally went to this whole project was kind of getting wrapped up, and we were being told, it's working. All this stuff is working. And so I went not to the IT guy, but I went to the HR people.
Yeah.
And I said, as soon as you've got a department here you want to get rid of, transfer me to that department and, give me whatever you are going to give them. And so they did. They said, we're shutting down this department over here, and we'll assign you to be an employee in that department. And starting tomorrow, you're fired, and you get like a year and a half severance. So I did. I got 16 or 17 months of pay continuance and insurance
Well,
continuance.
why couldn't they do that from your existing job? Why did you have to transfer to some new department?
That was being because my department that I was still in at that time was still
not being
they were
destroyed.
going to do something there, but they had some department somewhere that,
Oh, I see.
that they were willing to throw money at to
Okay.
move on.
So they did you a good favor.
So they did me a great favor to let me get out from there, and then that was all coming down here, and it's all downhill from there.
It's all downhill. Why don't we call it quits for tonight?
Yeah, I'm tired.
You must be exhausted. Excellent.
I get,
We'll have to continue this
I get one.
maybe in the morning or some other time or whatever.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I need to go find some pills to take.
Let me see if I can figure out
What
how
is
to-
your pill regimen? Are
Sure.
you on some blood thinners or